I was in my 4th month of pregnancy, so my abortion was in a hospital. I still don't, to this day, remember how I got there. And I ended up having a saline abortion because of how far along I was in my pregnancy. And a saline abortion, they inject your abdomen with saline solution, and what it does is it burns the baby to death. There's a quote from St. Louis Marie de Montfort's prayer to Jesus, and in it he says, "If it were not for the Blessed Mother, he would certainly be lost." And that's the way that I feel because I was definitely lost. I'm from New York. My name is Theresa Bonopartis, and I'm the developer of the Entering Canaan ministry for people who have had an abortion. And I just want to tell the story of how Mary has worked in my life. I grew up in an Italian American family. We were Catholic. We went to church every Sunday, but I didn't really know my faith at all. And I actually was a change of life baby. My mother was in her 40s when she got pregnant with me. And all through my life, she always used to say how I was a mistake. And I was really a lot younger than my siblings and always just really felt alone, with no connection to my parents or anything. So I really lived a life of searching for something. And when I got into high school, I searched and I found, and what I found wasn't so great. I grew up in the 60s, and at that time, it was the beginning of the sexual revolution, and everybody was sleeping around, and I wasn't. And I remember I always just felt like there was something wrong with me because I wasn't. And I ended up having a relationship with somebody and sleeping with them and becoming pregnant. And I could still remember when I found out that I was pregnant and just having a whole range of feelings go through me from being excited about it and then being terrified because my father was pretty strict and I was afraid to tell him. I told the baby's father, and he actually said that he would marry me. But I delayed telling my parents about my pregnancy. I was able to hide it. And I didn't end up telling them, until I was in my 4th month of pregnancy. I went through a lot of different scenarios in my head about what I thought would happen, but abortion was never one of them because we were Catholic, so I didn't think it would be an option. So I told my family, and, I got a very different reaction than what I thought I was gonna get. My father got up before out of his chair and told me to leave the house, that he was gonna forget that I was his daughter and that I should forget that I was his daughter. And I remember my mother following me around the house and just saying, like, some not nice stuff because I had become pregnant. And I called a friend of mine and I asked her, to come and pick me up. And, when I was leaving the house and walking down the walkway, I remember my sister coming over with my nieces and just this surreal feeling of not knowing if I was gonna see them again. And I got in the car, and another friend of mine's mother said that I could stay with them temporarily. So I went over there, and it was just, like, such a surreal, moment. Like, everybody got up, went to school, went to work, and I was just there very isolated and alone, started fighting with the baby's father, told him to leave me alone, and he did. He was a teenager too. We were both teenagers. Every day, my father would have my sister call me up and tell me that he wanted me to have an abortion, and every day I'd say, "No, I'm not gonna have an abortion, I don't wanna have an abortion," and my sister would be like, "What are you gonna do? How are you gonna support this baby? You're a teenager, you don't have a job, what are you gonna do?" And I would say, "I don't know, but I'm not gonna have an abortion." And this went on day after day after day, and really an abandonment and isolation, until finally I agreed to have the abortion. Nobody told me the development of my baby. Nobody told me anything that was gonna happen to me. I had no idea. I was a 17-year-old kid in a hospital room by myself with no knowledge of what was going on at all, the development of my baby, anything about the procedure, nothing. And, I remember the doctor coming into the room and injecting me with the saline solution and leaving. And then, like, hours later, going into labor, and my sister calling me and asking me, "Is it over yet?" And I would say to her, "No." Like, "What's going on?" "I don't know what's going on." I didn't know what was going on. I had no idea what was going on. And after many, many hours, I ended up, giving birth to a dead baby boy. And I still to this day could picture him laying on the bed next to me. And I just like I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that this was allowed. That how do we do this? How is this allowed? And I wanted to put him back inside of me, which I obviously couldn't. I remember thinking I wanted to jump out the window, but I had no, I just didn't have the courage to do that. I don't know what it was, but I rang for the nurse, and she walked into the room with this plastic jar with 3A marked on magic marker on the jar. And she came into the room and she picked up my son and she threw him in the jar and walked out of the room. And to say my life changed after that is an understatement. I hated myself. My family still wasn't talking to me, even though I had agreed to have the abortion. And my life just went to a complete downward spiral because I was filled with guilt and shame. I couldn't believe that I had done this. I thought, I'm damned to hell. There's no way back. I just started living a crazy life. I remember I went back to my friend's house the day after I had the abortion, and I could just remember all my other friends being over there and partying and drinking, and I remember me drinking so much I got so drunk I was throwing up all night long because it was just trying to get away from myself. And again, like my life just took a terrible turn after that because I hated myself. It was a few years before my family talked to me again, but nobody ever mentioned the abortion. It's as if it never happened. You weren't allowed to mention it at all. And I ended up meeting who was to become my husband. He was a drug and alcohol abuser. They say you pick what you think you deserve, and I didn't think I deserved anything good. And so I ended up in this terrible marriage with, all the craziness that goes around with addictions. And I ended up having 2 children with him, and both times in my pregnancy, I thought for sure God was gonna punish me. I hadn't stepped foot into a church. Like I said, I thought I was damned to hell. There was no way back or whatever. And, things just escalated with him, and I often say if I didn't have my sons, I probably would have stayed in an abusive relationship, but I didn't want them to be brought up in that, and so one day, when he came home really drunk, I picked my kids up, one in one arm, one in the other. They were, very young, and I walked out of the house, and I said, "You wanna kill yourself, go ahead, but I'm not staying here and watching it." I was talking to my family again. I stayed at my sister's until I got, like, kinda on my feet, and, yeah, just trying to find a way to make life okay for my sons, and I went back to school and became a drug and alcohol abuse counselor, and I started working in that field only with addictions, there's a lot of promiscuity. With a lot of promiscuity, comes a lot of pregnancy and a lot of abortions, and so I was getting a lot of patients that were post-abortive, and I couldn't deal with them because I couldn't even deal with my own abortion. When I was with my husband, we had gone for counseling, and I would always say, "I had an abortion, it bothers me," but nobody would recognize that. And, "No, it's his addiction. No, it's this." It was everything but the fact that I had taken the life of my son. And so I wasn't healed at all from my own abortion, and it got to the point where I just could not deal with it anymore, and I ended up burning out and leaving my job. About the same time, my older son was about 7, and even though I hadn't been in church for years by now, I did send him to religious instructions because I did want him to receive the sacraments. And I would drop him off at the corner and tell him to come to the corner to pick him up because I didn't want to go anywhere near the building because I was terrified. I thought I was doomed to hell. Then this note came home from religious education about how the parents had to go to this first penance meeting. And I just remember being terrified to go to this meeting, but I forced myself because I wanted him to receive the sacraments. And the priest came out and started speaking to us. And they started speaking about God's love and God's mercy and God's forgiveness. And up until this time, it was years now, and I was suffering from anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation. I mean, there was days where I couldn't even get out of bed. I was so afflicted by this. And anyway, so he started talking and he started mentioning certain sins. God will forgive this sin. God will forgive that sin. God will, and he, all of a sudden he said abortion. And I was sitting there thinking, wow, is this possible? Could God really forgive the sin of abortion? And I went home that night with the first hope that I had had in many years. And it took me a few days, but I finally got the courage to call this priest and ask him if I could come and see him. And I still very vividly remember pulling up to the rectory and being terrified to go in, feeling like my feet would glue to the floor of my car, and just forcing myself to get out and go. And I went in, and it was just so unbelievable because it was the first time I felt like anybody heard me. Anybody heard the pain, anybody heard the sorrow, the grief, the shame, all of the things that I had been experiencing. And yeah, it was just really amazing. And in the midst of this, obviously I went to the Sacrament of Reconciliation. And that day, after I received the sacrament, he gave me a miraculous medal to put around my neck, which I have had on ever since. I left that night and I just couldn't even believe what had just happened to me. And I just really became on this quest to come to know God and to try to open myself up to it. And because I wasn't working, I started going to daily mass. I started doing the Stations of the Cross. I started spending time before the Blessed Sacrament. And I can remember I used to go before the Blessed Sacrament and kneel there and say, they say that you heal. Well, I'm not going to leave you alone until you heal me. I would actually say that, like, I'm going to haunt you until you heal me. And so I really began on this quest to come to know God. And even with the miraculous medal, though, I really didn't even know anything about it. Like when I first had it put around my neck, but I wore it just because I felt protected by it. And this same priest started this group with a few parishioners of reading True Devotion by St. Louis Marie de Montfort, where you consecrate yourself to her after 33 days. So we did the book together. And at the end of 33 days, I consecrated myself to Mary. And I just say that act of consecration totally changed my life, totally changed my life. And since that time, like I always say, that I didn't seek out Mary, Mary sought out me. And she seeks out all of us. We just don't know it, that she's there for us, always ready to help us, to lead us to her son. And thanks be to God, every single year I renew my consecration for the 33 days. I try to live it every day, obviously. But it's been 37 years since I did this consecration. And if I had to name one thing that changed my life totally, it would be that. It would be the consecration to Our Lady. The priest tried to help me that I had gone to, but there was just so much he didn't know about that. I found a therapist who did post-abortion counseling, but it just wasn't happening. Like it was just like a block there for me. And then finally, after I found this therapist, one day when I was really suffering, and again, I used to feel sorry for my kids because I'd close myself in my room, I'd cut myself off from people. I was just really, really struggling with despair. Even though I was back in church, it was just a struggle because of my abortion. And one day when I was really suffering, my therapist said to me, have you ever told Our Lady that you're sorry? And I thought about it, and I said, "No, I probably never did that." So I went to the church, and I knelt in front of her, and I did that. And then that night, I was in really bad shape, and I put my kids to bed because I felt bad because they would always see me crying, and, they didn't know why, they were little. And, I put them to bed, and I went into the bathroom, and I crouched down on the floor, and over and over again, I just kept saying, "Jesus, I trust in you." And I was in there for hours saying that. And somewhere in the middle of the night, I just felt this warm rush go through me. And I knew that I had been touched by God. I just knew it. There's no adequate words to describe what happened. And I went to bed that night, and the next day I got up and I just felt totally different. I just realized such a need for ministry to help people who had had abortions. And I by that time, I was actually went to work in the Family Life Office of the Diocese of New York, and Cardinal John Cardinal O'Connor was there at that time, and we joke all the time because I say I haunted him about this, how we needed some kind of outreach to people. I knew I wasn't the only one. I had searched so much for healing. I had a really hard time finding it. And so after I was haunting the cardinal and stuff, he was going to be starting the Sisters of Life. And because I would just write to him all the time or talk to him and say, you really have to do this. This is like so important, because by then I had like reached out to other places, and you knew that there was other people, but at that time there really wasn't anything much out there at all. And he promised me when he started the Sisters of Life, it would be one of their apostolates. And the funny part was that one of the original Sisters of Life was from my parish, and I was friends with her. So he began the Sisters of Life. So one of the apostolates that we started was this ministry of reaching out to people who had had abortions. And at first, we just started with a day retreat to give them hope. And as we were doing this, all of a sudden the USCCB called us and said, well, we want a copy of your manual because we're looking to get this out there. And we're like, and what's the name of your ministry? And we're like, we don't have a name and we don't have a manual, because we were just doing what we were doing, you know? It was crazy. So then we started praying about all of this. And one day when I was in front of the Blessed Sacrament, as far as the name goes, I just got entering Canaan in my head, and I couldn't figure out what that would have to do with post-abortion healing. Like, what would it have to do with healing? But I went home and I took out the Bible and I started reading it, and it really made so much sense of walking to the promised land, healing, God saying, I'll be with you, you'll have battles, but accompany you. And it just fit so much. So that became the name of the ministry, is Entering Canaan. There was a church, and it was the church to Our Lady of Czestochowa. So I went in and I was intrigued by her with her dark face, and I tried to find out. Nobody really knew much about her at all. I kind of looked her up, and I found out that she was painted by St. Luke on a tabletop, and that she had gotten the scars on her face from an arrow, and just a lot of different. She was dark colored because of a fire, and just all that, and how they had tried to repair the image, painting it over, but how the scars kept coming back out again. So not long after that, I went to confession, and the priest in the confessional for my penance gave me a novena to do for Our Lady of Czestochowa. So I started doing that novena, which to this very day, I still pray every single day. And then one day again in prayer, I just felt her saying, this is my ministry. I want to be the patroness of this ministry. And I thought about all I had read about her, and it made so much sense. The scars on her face, the wounds on her face, and how they tried to cover them, but they came back out again, which is the same thing that happens to people that have had abortions. Forget about it. It's in your past. Don't think about it. Nobody will acknowledge the wounds that are there. And it just made so much sense that she would want to be the patroness. So she became the patroness of the ministry. And since then, in so many ways, she's just taken a role in it. And seeing how she worked in the ministry, like everything just seemed to come from her, all the retreats, everything. I just felt her hand in it all. And I've always said, it's hers, it's not mine. Whatever she puts in my mind, it's her that's putting it there. The Shrine of Our Lady of Czestochowa in Pennsylvania, they wanted pictures of people who had a devotion to Our Lady of Czestochowa, and they were going to make an image out of their pictures, like a mosaic out of their pictures. And so I sent my picture in for this mosaic, and when they were going to reveal it, they asked, they were having a mass to reveal it and whatever, and I went with somebody from the ministry, and we were sitting there, and it was a huge image of all these, and it was her image made out of everybody's face. And woman that I was with said to me, "Wouldn't it be crazy if you were in her wounds?" And I said, "Yeah, that would be really crazy." And that day, they told us how to find out where we were, and that's exactly where I am, right in the scar on her face. That's where my image was. So it was just like, in so many ways, I've realized that entering Canaan, it's a ministry for all those suffering from abortion, and thousands of people have been through it, praise God, and have had healing through it. And but mostly it's also been for me. It's been my journey with her.
Oh, sorrowful mother, your tears fall.
Again, in front of the Blessed Sacrament, I just had this image that she wanted me to get painted, and it was of just Mary sitting at the foot of the cross, and someone representing, you could call it Mary Magdalene, but it really would be anyone who suffered the pain of abortion, and putting her baby in Mary's hands and being at the foot of the cross with her. And to the right of the image, you could see these people walking to the promised land. And if you look closely, you'll see that Mary is leading the same woman who gave her baby at the foot of the cross. And it really is symbolic of just all she does for us, just her to relinquish, to listen to her, to allow her to lead us, to allow her to teach us how to love, right? To teach us about her son, to help us to get the tools that we need spiritually to be able to fight so many battles that come with abortion, the despair, all the different things that come with that. It's so hard to have people to internalize like what Mary has done for us in consenting to the crucifixion of her own son, so she knows what it's like to lose a child through a violent means. And I always say that hers was without sin, ours was with a lot of sin, but the loss of a child, and her consent to the crucifixion of her son for the forgiveness of our sins, and how she's there for us and how she wants to lead us, and that, you know, it was God's will to bring souls back, and she consented to that for us, and how she has forgiven and loved and loves us and leads us through this healing. And so in the process of their healing, I mean, that's what we always talk about, that she's there battling with you, that she's not going to let you lose, that she's going to keep leading you to her son. And it's really a journey. The journey to Canaan is the journey to healing. It's the journey to God. We have had millions of abortions in our country, and there's millions and millions of people separated from God because of abortion. And I think this is her call to let people know that it's okay, that she wants us to come to her. She wants us to allow her to lead us to God and to healing and to our children who, as John Paul II said, are living with the Lord. I'm just so grateful for the way that she's worked in my life and the things that she's done for me and continues to do for me every single day. And just her love and that gaze at the foot of the cross, just to be at the foot of the cross with her. And I guess maybe that's the other thing that I want to say is the foot of the cross, something that you'd always be terrified of. And I don't feel like that at all anymore. I want to be at the foot of the cross because I believe that abortion is the ultimate failure of love. It's the ultimate failure of love, to take the life of your own child. And the cross is the ultimate fulfillment of love. And so to be there, and even abortion can't stop God's love and forgiveness. And that's really the lesson in all of that, that at the cross he died for our sins, even the worst sins, and even abortion can't kill God's love. And just wanting to get that message out to people, that they don't have to be alone, they don't have to suffer alone, that there is healing, there is forgiveness, that God is waiting for them, he's merciful, and that Mary is waiting to lead them to him.
Oh, sorrowful mother, you carry our pain. sorrowful mother. Your tears fall like rain. Simeon foretold how your heart would break, pierced by a sword, your son's cruel fate. Those words cut you so deep, oh sorry.